Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, August the 6th, and now it's 12:35 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. Welcome everyone. We're gonna get started with the news as usual. Let's take a look at what's going on in Brazil. And let me know if things are working as they should. I'm trying to show over here, the main headlines for news from the Estadão. Estadão is a major newspaper in Brazil. They have been around for 150 years, and you can tell by the 150 down here is a very solid newspaper distributed across the country. And the main headline, I'm going to translate for you. Which municipalities or cities of Brazil are being more affected by the tariffs, right? And very interesting. I mean, everybody knows so well about which tariff is we're talking about. They don't even mention tariffs from the United States, right? So nowadays in Brazil, we just say the tariffs, right? The tariffs are the tariffs coming from the U.S. And here they have like a map and an interactive list with the cities that are being more affected. Okay, and here you have President Trump, and then says Brazil is facing the new relationship or the new normal with Donald Trump, right? There is an ongoing dispute, as you probably know, between President Donald Trump and President Lula, and also the Brazilian Supreme Court. And, there are probably, problems on both sides of the aisle, if you will. I'm not going to take sides. I don't want to aggravate, my audience. But, just sharing the news, very typical, the United States taking most of the news space on the main pages of Brazilian newspapers. And it's not only now, right, with this whole ordeal, but typically we like to know what's going on with the United States, whether or not related to Brazil. All right, so here we are, Brazil Vibes. Welcome, Brazil Vibes. Sound check is good. Thank you for letting us know, sound check, Brazil Vibes. And I think we have other friends joining us. Remember, if you are here, watching our live stream, you have a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed live. So don't be shy. Let me know what you'd like to discuss. And it doesn't need to be just legal stuff, right? Many people, they do have their questions, their interests in terms of, coming to Brazil legally, how to set up a longer-term immigration plan. And other people, they just want to know, things that are more, of their daily activities in Brazil, places to go, cities to visit. All the subjects are welcome here at the channel, okay? All right, so let me start with something from my backlog over here. A very recurring subject is the common law marriage in Brazil, the so-called união estável, and interesting that many times coupled with the purchase of real estate, right? So there is a kind of playbook, or a type of routine or a type of journey that we see very often happening. And maybe I'm sharing, at this point more as a warning or, a heads up. And maybe, my recommendation is going to be for people, whenever you are coming to Brazil, whenever you are establishing yourself, just to go slow when it comes to relationships, right? I don't know, maybe whenever, people from other countries, they come to Brazil, they just get too excited and they cannot help themselves. And they kind of, enter into relationships that are not typical for, to a Brazilian. And they just look weird, okay? And, so that's going to be my heads up. If you come into Brazil, just take your time. Don't rush into relationships. There shouldn't be an expectation that as soon as you arrive in Brazil, you're going to buy a property just because you can. All right. So just take your time and take into consideration that Brazilians, they don't typically have, or they shouldn't have, really high expectations in terms of your financials. It's just not part of our culture to be as straightforward as U.S. citizens are about money. So, if you're looking for a longer-term partner, again, take your time. Understand that you don't need to rush into buying a property, right? And you don't need to rush into a relationship, right? My younger son, like his name is Victor, and he likes to say, he likes to joke, right? That there is a lot of fish in the sea. Okay, that's his, his take on relationships. Like, you don't need to rush yourself. You don't need to lock yourself in prematurely, if you will. Okay, and if you feel any push, from a Brazilian for you to, pay these Brazilians' bills, or you buy a property because every couple should have a property. But again, you are in the early stages of your relationship. I think it's an opportunity for you to reevaluate this relationship, because again, this is not typical to Brazilians. All right, and I hope this was helpful. Brazil Vibes has a question. First question. I have a 1-year dog, a Yorker. What is the process for the requirement visa with a 1-year old dog to move to Brazil? So Brazil Vibes, like typically dogs, they're not considered as merchandise, but from the Brazilian legal perspective, they are like things, right? And I don't mean to offend you. Like, I also have a yellow lab that I love, and I just see my yellow lab as part of the family. But from a technical legal perspective, dogs are just like things. And whenever you're bringing, something from abroad to Brazil, this concept is gonna impact on two fronts. The first front is like for you to pay to bring something to Brazil. So typically, if it is a service dog, you can bring in the main cabin, and you're not gonna pay anything. Like American Airlines has this policy. Service dogs, naturally, they don't cost you anything. You can bring one dog, two dogs. I've seen more than once, people traveling even with two service dogs, right? But they were really, well trained. They would stay still. They wouldn't cause, like a mess at the airplane. And if that's the case, you can bring without a cost. Now, if you're bringing as a cargo, let's say if you have a yellow lab, right, and you want to bring a yellow lab to Brazil, and it's not a service dog, then it's going to come as a cargo. Of course, they have special containers for the dogs, and you're going to pay, substantial fees. Just to give an idea, like for a large breed to be transported from the United States to the northeast of Brazil, you're looking at something like $8,000 to $9,000 US, right? So a lot of money. Okay, because then you need to bring this animal as a cargo to São Paulo, and then from São Paulo, for large breeds, as far as I know, there are no airlines making the transportation, so you need to pay a service. There is a service that is going to, transport your animal from São Paulo to the northeast by wheels, right? And it is refrigerated. There is AC. They have stops in the in the way to the northeast, but extremely expensive. Now, again, for small breeds, costs, and particularly if you're going to somewhere like Rio de Janeiro or São Paulo, and then you're not going to need the additional leg to the northeast, price is going to reduce substantially, and also the size of the breed, right? So maybe for a Yorker, If you're going to São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, you're not going to even spend a couple of $1,000. Okay, and this is on the cost. This is on the transportation perspective, and the other outcome of considering dogs as things is that whenever you bring something to Brazil, guess what? There are customs. So your animal is going to need to clear customs just like any other merchandise. And there are brokers specializing in handling the paperwork. As you probably know, Brazil Vibes, like Brazil is pretty big on red tape and bureaucracy, and therefore, whenever you bring in like animals to Brazil, guess what? There's going to be a ton of paperwork to be completed, to be presented. You're going to pay taxes. You're going to pay a broker. But that's another perspective of bringing animals to Brazil. I hope that was helpful, Brazil Vibes. Logan. Hello, Logan. Hello. I just got my CPF here in Brazil. I want to buy a condo in São Paulo. Should I hire a real estate lawyer? Logan, that's that's an interesting question for you to make to a Brazilian real estate lawyer. Difficult for me to tell you, no, don't hire a real estate lawyer, but I'm going to share some information so you can make an informed decision, right? Whenever you are buying properties, typically you're gonna interact with realtors, right? In Brazil, like the real estate profession is not as well developed as it is in the United States. So in Brazil, there is still this kind of idea that a single realtor could represent both sides, and we know typically the realtor in this type of circumstance is going to be representing only the seller, right? Like they're going to tell you they are helping you, but the person who's going to write their check is going to be their seller. And in my opinion, that's where their allegiance is gonna sit, right? Like with the person writing the check. So that's the first piece of information for you to consider. Second, in Brazil, there is no title insurance, meaning that if you buy a property with a bad title, you are on your own. And this does happen every now and then, right? And the third factor is going to be the lack of escrow. In the United States, typically the title company, let's say Chicago Title, if you're working with Chicago Title, they are going to both insure the title, meaning that you're going to pay an insurance like $2,000-$3,000 typically. And if the title is bad, guess what? Someone is going to come to the rescue, right? And the same company is going to typically handle the escrow, meaning that the buyer is going to send the funds to Chicago Title, and Chicago Title is not going to release the funds to the seller until the seller has signed all the documents to transfer the legal ownership to you. And we don't have an escrow typically in Brazil. Now, there are some efforts, like from some banks and some registries, the so-called cartórios in Brazil, to provide an escrow, but typically sellers, they are not used to escrows, and therefore if you come up with an idea of using a traditional escrow, they most probably turn down your offer, right? And so because of those concerns, I do recommend that you secure a real estate lawyer, to make sure that you get what you're paying for. Now, another variation of this question, Logan, is going to come like this. Well, I heard that a friend of mine, they bought a property with a realtor. Nothing bad happened, right? Why should I hire an attorney? And then my typical answer is going to be, listen, probably 80 to 85% of the transactions, they are going to work just fine if you work with a realtor. However, around 15% in our experience, right? Like this is not like an official statistic, but this is something from our experience. Like, 15% of the time, you're going to have something serious happening to either the transaction or the property, right? So the take here, or the take home here, is that you can, take the chances, and maybe you can buy one, you can buy two properties, you could buy three properties, everything could be all right. Maybe on the fourth property, you can, potentially, if something goes wrong, lose either a substantial amount of money, in legal fees, fighting whatever went wrong with the transaction, or in some more extreme cases, lose your shirt, right? So my take over here, and that's how I think about myself if I went to, I don't know, Thailand, and if I was going to buy a property, and someone said, listen, I'm going to charge you 5% of this apartment price, and I'm going to handle pretty much everything on your behalf. So you don't know the culture, you don't know the laws, you don't know how, property conveyance works, but I charge you 5% and I take care of absolutely everything. Like I would, purchase this service with a big smile on my face. But that's me, right? Like, I mean, I like to get what I'm paying for. And so that's my answer, Logan. Like I'm providing you, with some, pieces of information for you to decide if you should hire a real estate lawyer or not. Phil Henry, thumbs up. Hey, Phil, good to see you over here. Thank you for the participation. Yui, how's it going, Yui? Hello. Regarding the civil marriage, I saw some news about Operação Pátria Alugada. Have you seen the news? Is this a common thing now? I have not, Yui. When did that happen? Let me search here real quick. Operação Pátria Alugada. Let's see what's going on. All right. Very interesting sharing. The Brazilian Federal Police is starting actions against recordings of foreign citizens in Rio de Janeiro who are establishing it. That's interesting, right? Like I'm gonna share over here. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Yui. Such an interesting topic. So here, the news goes like this: like people are setting up União Estável or a civil union just for the purpose of securing residency in Brazil, meaning that they are not really in a legitimate relationship. They are just, handling or shuffling paperwork in order to apply for residency in Brazil, right? And here says like a group of foreigners, right? So there are, look at that, like they're sending the police, the police is chasing a specific lawyer in the Bairro da Glória, and who was articulating the frauds to assist such foreign citizens to stay in Brazil, right? So pretty extreme, so nice sharing, very nice sharing, Yui. So yes, I mean, there are, all types of lawyers out there. And unfortunately, this lawyer here, he was helping foreign citizens, to defraud the Brazilian immigration system by, kind of probably facilitating, right? Facilitating fake common law marriages or the so-called civil union, right? And that's something, I'm very glad that we don't have those kinds of requests very often. I think that typically clients are going to understand, we are not amenable to this type of practice. But as an exception, like we did here, is there an easy way? Is there a shortcut, right? Like whenever we hear this type of language, we understand that particular prospect is not a good fit for our firm. And here they are, right? Like now they are probably going to have not only their residency applications revoked, but they are also going to be entangled in criminal charges as well, right, Yui? So, so nice to see that happening. I'm very happy that, this is happening because for those of you who do the right thing, you need to go through, a lot of, red tape and bureaucracy. So I don't think it is fair for, someone to, kind of defraud the Brazilian immigration system. Okay, that's my take typically in immigration, all right? Aaron, oi Luciano, bom dia. I'm curious, if there isn't title insurance in Brazil, why wouldn't someone start this type of business? Too much red tape. Aaron, that's a great question, right? That's a really nice question. And I think there are a couple of factors that are going to preclude this. One thing is going to be the resistance by Brazilians to pay any money. Like money in Brazil is scarce, right? Like, I mean, it's not like in the United States you say, listen, I need to pay $2,000 to $3,000 to get title insurance. It doesn't make a difference, right? In Brazil, like if you talk about saving $2,000 to $3,000, that may be enough for Brazilians to take the risk, right? Like that's another factor, like a trait in the Brazilian culture of, like taking risks and always believing that tomorrow is going to be just fine, right? And actually, that's not always the case. So I think, when you consider the bulk of the Brazilian market, which of course is made up of Brazilians, the market is not really amenable to the title insurance. Okay, one possibility would be setting up title insurance for foreign citizens, and that would be actually a great idea, Aaron. That's actually a great idea. Maybe work with a segment that can recognize, the value of title insurance. Maybe one more factor is that even though we still have problems in real estate transactions, or we have a lot of room for issues and concerns about title in real estate transactions in Brazil, is that, like in theory, the registrar or the registry dynamics in Brazil, they are, I would say, potentially better than they are in the United States. In the United States, you typically record transactions at the county level. The county is going to keep like records for real estate, but there is no real, as far as I understand, you could record things in different places. So I think in Brazil, because typically you're going to have a single place in charge of records related to a property, the impression that we have as Brazilians is that it is easier to look at the chain of ownership and make a decision. Okay, so risk component, perspective that things are going to be all right tomorrow, and probably the registry system in Brazil, they are some of the reasons why title insurance does not develop in Brazil. But I like the concept, and I think that like a financial player focusing on foreign citizens could easily pull this off. Aaron, nice sharing. Logan, all right, okay, are you hire a lawyer? All right, happy to hear, Logan. You may want to schedule a consultation with us. We can like discuss about your transaction, about your plans, and share a little bit about our decades-long experience in this segment in Brazil. Yui, I only heard about Brazilians doing this in reverse from Brazil to the US for green cards. Exactly. Yuri, I heard about that as well. But this is interesting. Seems like interest in Brazil is growing. Yes, that's for sure, Yuri. Like with globalization, with, war in Europe, with a lot of, aggravation among U.S. citizens because of, political polarization. Like interest in Brazil has been growing and growing, pretty much steadily for the several past years. And yes, that's an interesting take. But yes, I also heard about that, a lot of Brazilians would, kind of marry a U.S. citizen just like to get a green card, right? Like, and sometimes it would be in exchange for money. And, other times they would get into a kind of, like short-term relationship just, for the interest of securing a green card and not really, be with that particular person, right? Which is pretty sad in my opinion. But I mean, you mentioning, and I'm just like agreeing that this is something I heard and probably saw more than once happening in the United States, Huey. Caitlin Wong, can you speak about the health insurance policy? I have insurance through my company in California. Can I keep this while having the digital nomad? So, Caitlin, the way it works is like if you are interested in applying for the digital nomad track, you can either apply in the United States or you can also apply in Brazil, physically in Brazil. If you apply in the United States, the consulates are going to require health insurance. And a good thing you're saying, health insurance, because, let's take this out of the way. Like, travel insurance does not qualify at all. So yes, it gotta be health insurance, and this health insurance needs to provide the coverage in Brazil. Okay, so here the point is not if you're gonna use it or not, if you can or you cannot use. The point is that you have a health insurance providing coverage in Brazil. So typically for the consulate, you're gonna need to show both a summary of your policy as well as the service terms showing that that particular policy would work for you during the duration of the digital nomad, right? Now, very interesting to note, if you are physically in Brazil applying for the digital nomad, there is no such requirement, meaning you can have zero health insurance and you're just fine, all right? So here we are talking about the requirement perspective. Now, in terms of using health insurance or not in Brazil, I guarantee any health insurance from the United States are not going to be accepted by by most of the health service providers. Maybe like the top 3 to 5%, largest or more expensive establishments in Brazil, they would be sophisticated enough to handle international or U.S. health insurance. So if your health insurance does provide coverage, once you are in Brazil, you would have to pay, out of pocket, and then seek a reimbursement through your service in the United States, right? Through your provider in the United States. Our strategy here, Caitlin, is that we would say, listen, if you don't have a qualifying health insurance, apply in Brazil. Right. First, you will need to get an e-visa to enter Brazil. Once you are in Brazil, you apply for the digital nomad residency because it's no longer a visa when you apply inside Brazil. It's going to be a residency instead of a visa. So you're not going to need to show any health insurance. And then once you are in Brazil, your next question is going to be probably, well, but are you suggesting that I stay in Brazil without health insurance? And no, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying that if you apply in Brazil, you don't need to get health insurance just for the sake of satisfying the immigration requirement. Our strategy is that you should get the RNM card first, meaning you're going to have the resident card, and then based on the resident card, you can buy cheap, effective health insurance in Brazil based on the fact that you are now a resident, right? Once you become a resident, guess what? You're going to be able to buy the same health insurance that we Brazilians, that I have in Brazil, and they are typically substantially more affordable than what you see in the United States. In my opinion, services are better in Brazil, like from the health, like health service perspective. And yes, you don't need to pay ahead of time and seek reimbursement. You just use the plan, and typically they're just going to charge the co-payment, if any. All right, Caitlin, I hope that was helpful. Denzel Mason. Hi, Luciano. I'm concerned about getting my RNM. My UK passport just has my first and last names, while my birth certificate has a middle name. Is that a problem? Denzel, typically, yes, there would be a problem because, the Brazilian immigration, they're just paranoid about identification. So if you have if your passport says one thing and your birth certificate says something else, yes, that could be a problem. However, we have strategies here at the firm to mitigate this problem, okay? And we could discuss that in a consultation, or if you hire our service, yes, we can help you troubleshoot the name discrepancy within the application itself. All right, Denzel. Caitlin, with the resident card, can I go back and forth between America and Brazil? Certainly, yes. That's a common question, and the answer is absolutely. You are welcome, to come and go as many times as you want. And I understand, like Portugal, for instance, if you apply for the D8, which is the digital nomad from Portugal, the name, the technical name, or the label is usually D8. That's how people communicate. Once you get the visa, you have only 2 entries in Portugal, right? So I understand where you're coming from. Like for Brazil, we don't have such a limitation. If you want to travel 10 times, during a year, that's fine. If you want to travel 20, that's absolutely fine. Okay, no concerns at all. Denzel, thank you, Luciano. You're pretty welcome, Denzel. Thank you for showing up and participating here in our live stream. And by the way, if you are here, enjoy our live stream, please consider liking our live stream. Click on the thumbs up. Consider following us for more content. And when you like our live stream, this is helpful for our business, and you also help other people just like you to find our content. Yui, what city or state in Brazil is the safest to live for a young gringo? Seeing some news about women drugging men like the same way in Colombia with escopolamina. That's serious stuff, all right. I mean, I heard before. I think this is not that common, Yuri. But like typically when we're talking about the safest Brazilian cities, we're going to be talking about robbery, about armed robbery, about this type of stuff. Like the drugging part of it, like it's not probably something that I could, advise on which cities are not going to have this problem, because I think this is not really related to, violence and safety in general. Is something more specific, even though, of course, naturally, that's very concerning, no question about it. But if we're talking about safety in general, a few places you could consider are going to be, Florianopolis, super safe, right? Like Florianopolis. The south of Brazil in general is going to be safer than the remaining of the country, particularly when you compare to the northeast, like to the north. But we have a list of cities that have ranked high in public safety in the past, Yui, that you could use. It's a little bit outdated, right? But you could see if there is like a more recent version of this list, and I can share here, like the list we have, and to be honest with you, I know many of the cities, and they are still pretty safe. Safest cities. All right, where to buy real estate in Brazil. All right. And here we have, like a list of the safest cities. As you can see, this list is from 2022, so it's not that old, I guess. And there are cities like in the state of São Paulo. They are all in the countryside, right? Like São Paulo city itself, in my opinion, is not the safest for sure. But for instance, right, like Valinhos, I used to live in a neighbor city called Vinhedo. So Vinhedo and Valinhos, they're pretty much, the same geographic area, and it was just amazing how safe those cities were, right? Like there are some cities in Santa Catarina, there are some cities in Minas Gerais. So, with the exception of Minas Gerais, which is more like center, west of Brazil, everything else here is going to be like south of the country, okay? Here we have like an expanded list. And then you have, like again, Santa Catarina, state of São Paulo, state of Minas Gerais. They are all in this very same state, right? I think it's so interesting, right? Like Santa Catarina. Santa Catarina is the state in which Florianopolis sits. So, not surprisingly, many people, they like to go to Santa Catarina. Many foreign citizens living in either Florianopolis, which is the capital of Santa Catarina. There is Camboriú, which is another like city which foreign citizens love, right? But you can take a look at this list. I think it could be a good start for you in terms of planning and understanding the which cities would be the safest in Brazil. All right. I have here something else from our backlog, which is the need to register, marriages in Brazil. The question is if you, as a U.S. citizen, wanting to live long term, if you need to register your marriage in Brazil. So typically, this obligation of recording a marriage from abroad in Brazil, this is going to be for Brazilians, right? Or either for Brazilians or the spouses of Brazilians. So, if you married abroad and now you're living in Brazil with your spouse, typically you don't need to record your marriage because, again, there is no Brazilian in the loop. Let's assume you and your spouse are both from the U.S. There is no need for you to record your marriage just because you're living in Brazil. There may be an exception, like if you try to buy a property, then Brazil wants your marriage certificate to be recorded in Brazil to give a publicity about the fact that you're married. And therefore, when you buy the property, guess what? This property is going to be recorded on both names. And whenever you sell the property, then again, the buyer is going to have notice that he should get the property from both sellers, meaning the husband and the wife, or the spouses in a more general sense. But this is the point of recording stuff in Brazil. Brazil is pretty big in this type of registry called cartório, right? And there are 7 different types of cartórios in Brazil. There is one cartório that's going to specialize in like civil life, meaning this cartório is going to record marriage, birth, death, divorce, and so on. There is a second one which is called ofício de notas, that's going to specialize in things such as closing for a real estate transaction, like a civil union paperwork and other things. This is the second type. There is a third one which is called RTD, which basically they just record paperwork and scan those documents and make it public. And this is going to bring some level of acceptance to the paperwork being recorded. There are 3 other types, right? But these are the main ones. And, again, cartórios are very typical of the Brazilian civil life. And if you come to live in Brazil, yes, you're going to interact with, cartórios a lot, because that's how we kind of regulate the relationships, the facts of life and business in general, right? So the cartórios are pretty important for the Brazilian legal system, right? Another interesting information about cartórios registries is that many people, they are going to translate as notary public. Okay, so if you have a closing in Brazil, many attorneys, sometimes even our staff, right? We need to train some of them better, because they're going to say, well, you're going to go to the notary public. I don't like the translation or, the equivalence of a notary public, particularly from the United States. Because in the United States, for a notary public license, You don't need to study anything. Like, I mean, I think it is something you could study in a weekend. You would take a test, and next week you're going to be working at UPS as a notary public, right? Like stamping stuff. In Brazil, the officers of the cartórios, they're going to typically have a degree in law, and they're going to be, and they would have to study, typically for over 10 years in order to pass the super hard examination required for you to be accepted as the officer of a cartório, right? And so, like for the most competitive ones, it is common for people to study for 30 years to be able to secure one of the most interesting cartórios from an economic perspective, right? So whenever someone says, yeah, notary public and cartórios are the same thing, I mean, they are, like two completely different things. But this is more like, additional information for you guys to understand the nature of, cartórios and registries in Brazil. Isan, hello, my name is Isan. I want to book private consultation regarding Brazilian citizenship through proof of descent. How can I do that, Isan? So to book a consultation, all you need to do is to come to our website. I'm sharing here my website. So you're gonna come here, and just look the right side. There's gonna be a schedule appointment. Okay, and then you're gonna pick a time, and you can see our calendar over here. You pick a time. There is like information that you're gonna enter. We charge a fee that is applied as a credit in case you hire our services in the future. So pretty easy. That's exactly how you do it, son. Thank you for asking. Voyages, journeys, thank you for being knowledgeable on this topic, sir. Thank you for showing up, Voyages. What is the best visa to apply for when visiting Brazil for the first time and yet willing to stay for at least 3 months? So voyages, like typically whenever you enter Brazil, you are given 90 days. You are given 90 days to stay, right? So whatever gets you through the door is going to meet here your threshold, right? Like the 3 months is kind of standard. Yes, there is some level of discretion. In theory, an immigration officer could give you less, and we saw that happening in the past. But I would say probably 95% of the time you're going to get the standard 90 days, and the visa is going to depend on your nationality, Voyages, all right? So what is your nationality so we could better understand what's available to you? Nowadays, Brazil is doing a lot of differentiation in terms of what you can get based on your nationality. So for most developing countries, Brazil, for instance, is not actually offering the digital nomad, right? Like if you try to, apply for the digital nomad visa from Africa, it's very hard for you first to find, like a Brazilian consulate that's going to be accepting applications for the digital nomad. And if they do, guess what? They are going to be really, really tough on evaluating, the requirements whenever you apply. All right, so that's true, right? Like, and many times, like we see that, being criticized, like particularly, the United States who does that. But even Brazil, and I guess, given the state of things, like this is becoming more normal. We have like an ongoing. Maybe some of you know about it, but there is a new law being passed in Portugal, reducing substantially the pathways for people to enter and stay in Brazil. In the country, meaning in Portugal, right? Now, in Brazil, given the continental dimensions of our country, Brazil is not that concerned about, like being let's say invaded, like if you will, by other nationalities, but still, like they try to keep control over the immigration. So for countries in which they believe, typically people would not qualify for the digital nomad, or they would try to, present paperwork that is not legitimate, Brazil has been closing the doors to many of those countries. All right. Cameroon, yeah, I mean, you see voyages like, I didn't know about it, but Cameroon is like in Africa. So there is no easy visa for Brazil when you live in Africa, voyages. And not my choice, you don't shoot the messenger, right? Like, I'm just answering what you asked. Now, in terms of a pathway to Brazil, what I see, some people, from Africa and other, developing places, is that instead of coming directly to Brazil, they are going to travel to a neighbor country, and then they are going to enter Brazil from this neighbor country. Because many times, they are going to be looking for, like a refugee status or asylum, right? And so if they can get to a Brazilian border, excuse me, they could potentially ask for, or apply for an asylum once they arrive at a Brazilian border, right? So that's another strategy we see some people following. All right, voyages. I hope that was helpful. Aaron, I bought a pre-construction condo during the weekend. Congratulations, Aaron. The contract has my first three names, but not my family name. It has my CPF, but not my R&M. Is this going to be a problem for the cartório? Aaron, so typically the contract is just like, a promise, right? Like, a contract from a legal perspective is just a promise. So typically you need to have your documents in good shape for the closing, okay? So for the closing. And I don't think it is a big deal, how your name is spelled in the contract. Now, if this is something you are paying, you are, like, of course, paying good money for, you could also ask them to rectify the contract, right? Like, they are not going to write a new one, but they typically will add an addendum or, like a couple of pages specifying the change to the name, or, clarifying that the name of the contract, it is a different name, all right? So that's something you can also consider. Voyages, U.S. resident. Voyages, that changes the scenario, because typically if you are a U.S. resident, voyages, you can apply through the Brazilian consulates using the same visas available to U.S. citizens, right? So let's say if you live in California, if you have access to the San Francisco or the Los Angeles, Brazilian consulates, you could potentially just apply over there, right? And the requirement here is that you are actually a legal resident in Brazil. If you're just visiting the United States, typically the Brazilian consulate is going to deny your application. They're going to say, listen, if you don't live in the United States, you got to apply back in your country of origin, right? But if you are a legal resident, naturally the consulate would not say so. They're going to say, listen, I understand you live here in the United States, and therefore you're going to apply through the United States, all right? I hope that makes sense. Voyages, thank you for the answer, sir. We respect countries' visa requirements of state. Does traveling from the U.S. influence on how the visa application is processed? So yes, voyages, that's exactly what I was commenting on. And yes, so if you live in the U.S., there is a much bigger door for you to go through, right? If you will, voyages, all right? So yes. Yui, 15 viewers and only 2 likes. Everyone liked the video. Come on, thank you for cheering us up, Yui. Yes, if you are here with us. But now I see 10 likes, Yui. Maybe people heard what you said and they did like the video. Now I see 10 likes. But always you are always. I always appreciate any suggestion to like our video. Yes, it does help whenever you like. Thank you so much, Yui. And by the way, I have a good news for you guys. Like for those of you who work or are working during our Wednesday live stream, we're gonna have again a live stream on Sunday. Okay, so this live stream is gonna be on Sunday, and Sunday meaning August the 10th is gonna be at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, and we're gonna try to keep consistently two live streams on Sundays. All right, like we did have live streams very often on Sundays, and now we're gonna try to keep it at two. And I understand that as long as we let you know up front, you can then plan accordingly and have your topics of interest discussed in one of those two live streams. I hope that makes sense. I hope that was helpful. Let me see if we have any other participations before we call it a day. Let me give it a second. And by the way, our live stream for August the 10th at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, it's already live on our YouTube page. All right, so you can just come over, click on notify me so you don't, miss the live stream. All right, and voyages. We invite Brazil to consider setting consulates and embassy in Cameroon. If not yet, thank you again for your answers. There you go, voyages. Yes, I'm not familiar with with this point. Brazil does have a consulate in many African countries actually. Particularly those with Portuguese speakers, like Angola, for instance. Angola is like I think the largest African country in which people speak Portuguese. So for those, Brazil actually has a big, consulate presence in those countries. Others, because of historical reasons, like in Nairobi, you're going to have a consulate as well. All right, but there you go. Voyages suggesting, setting up a consulate in Cameroon. There you go. Aaron, what options do you recommend for language learning? And Aaron, so for language learning, in my opinion, whenever you are living in Brazil, just go out there and make friends, go to the bakery to buy bread like in the morning, like it's very typical for us Brazilians. Make friends, start a conversation. Typically foreign citizens are always well received, they are respected, they are appreciated in Brazil, even if you are a U.S. citizen, even with the whole dispute, between the two countries. I would say, the vast majority of Brazilians like U.S. citizens. So, just go out there, Aaron, and make friends, start to communicate, because in my opinion, there is nothing better than, practicing the language to really learn the language, right? So that's my take. And I'm going to finish up with Edgar. Edgar Richardson. Boa tarde. I'm a recent client at your firm. Happy to know that, Edgar. I'm just beginning my retirement residency. Do you have any recommendations for relocating to Rio with shipping companies? I understand Rio is notorious. I missed that part over here, Edgar. But yes. So, just tell your analyst, right? That you want a referral for the shipping companies, and we have at least a couple of companies that we have been referring over time, and they do a decent job, right? They've been in the market, I think, for 15, 20 years already, and yes, Edgar. So we do have a referral for that. And just ask, your analyst for a referral, and they are going to be happy to provide you with one, Edgar. All right? So that's it for today. I want to thank you all for participating. As usual, I like to say that if I don't have a participation, it's just like a talking head, it's just like myself talking stuff. And whenever you participate, it becomes much more interesting because then it's interactive, and then I can address, like let's say real life subjects. Some of you have been attending our live stream for a while, and I do appreciate the support. So that's it. I'm gonna see you guys again on Sunday. That's gonna be at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, and I'm gonna wish you guys a blessed rest of your Wednesday.